Time now.
From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as...
Johnny Dollar.
You're the man who was sent here by the bonding company, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Who's this?
My name is Shade, Pat Shade. I'm a private detective working on the case for the bank.
Fine. I didn't know they'd hired one, too.
They call me every once in a while, tracing phonies mostly.
Is there any chance that you know the missing messenger?
Yeah, I know, Lillis. I had him tagged as a clean, honest kid. I still have.
What do you think happened, then?
I'm afraid he was either snatched or killed, or both. But that's just my opinion. I wondered if you'd like to get together and compare notes.
I don't have any notes yet, but I'll be glad to pick up your brain.
Pick up your what?
I don't have any notes yet, but I'll be glad to pick your brain. Any place you say.
Edmund O'Brien, in another adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator...
Get out of the business before it's too late. There's no future in it.
I've heard that said before, but never by anybody who left it for something better.
I wish I'd stayed on the force. I'd be on pension now. You know, Scotty Dyer's old man and I walked a beat together. Scotty's a good cop. What'd he tell you?
Nothing, really. I just phoned to check in with him, and he gave me a free hand. Tell me about this Henry Lillis.
Nothing much to tell. Bright kid, a couple of years out of high school. His father's dead, and he's got a mother to help support.
You think you know him well enough to be sure of the honesty you mentioned on the phone?
Sure? No. I'm not sure of anything anymore, anything or anybody. But there's nothing in his background to tell you anything else. He had to have a pretty good record to be bonded by this company, you know that.
That's why you think somebody grabbed him, huh?
It's my hunch, yeah, I think so. Do you know anything different?
No, but it strikes me that a snatch would be pretty hard to carry off in a street as busy as LaSalle at 10:30 in the morning without drawing some attention. Sergeant Dyer tells me none of the people who were near there at the time saw any trouble.
It would depend on how it was done. Now, understand, this is only my hunch. I don't have the case solved yet.
Has anybody talked to his mother, do you know?
I think the cops went out this morning.
I guess it'll be all right for me to go out this evening.
Worrying about her son, she's probably not going to be in very good shape.
Maybe not. But sometimes people who are in bad shape drop a lot of information they wouldn't drop otherwise. Shall we have another round? The Lillis house was a small one in a respectable but not plushy neighborhood. It had been painted recently, and its yard was well tended. I noted these things because they made it appear that, except for widowhood, Mrs. Lillis and her son were a comfortable and average American family. She was an attractive woman of some 40 years who, obviously and with good cause, had been crying.
Please sit down, Mr. Dollar.
Thank you.
The police have already been here. I suppose you know that.
Yes, I knew they'd come.
They didn't say it in so many words, but after they left, I realized they suspect that my son is responsible for this crime, don't they?
They aren't sure of anything yet, Mrs. Lillis.
It's terribly difficult as a mother to be fair and honest. If Henry did this thing himself, then at least he may be safe and unharmed, and he may come back and take his punishment. Do you understand?
Of course I do.
Naturally, my first instinct was to defend him against the suspicion. couldn't believe it was possible that my son was a thief. But then I realized if someone else was responsible, then Henry had been kidnapped and would be in serious danger. So now, Mr. Dollar, I'm praying that my son is guilty. And if he is, I'll do everything I can to see him brought to justice.
I know it's a bad situation for you, but I'll make my part of it as easy as I can. Did your son say or do anything that would have indicated he was planning anything like this? Was he in trouble, or was there anything he wanted to get away from?
No, nothing that I noticed. Henry was forced into manhood quite early. He's been without a father since he was 9. He became quite independent, and he shared very little of his outside life with me. He may have wanted to get away from me, however.
You mean that he didn't like his responsibility?
Yes, he wants me to marry again.
I understood that he wasn't your sole support.
No, my husband left me a small income from his insurance. I own this house, but Henry's earnings have always helped.
Who are his friends, Mrs. Lillis? I may want to talk to them.
Well, he sees hardly any of the friends he made in school. Most of them went on to college. There's one I know of, Raymond Lockhart. He works in a service station on North Michigan Avenue.
And you don't know who your son spent the rest of his time with?
I'm afraid I don't. Oh, I was very wise. I wasn't going to make the same mistake so many widows do with their sons, with possessiveness and too much prying in the name of protection. I let Henry work out his own life and asked very few questions. I was so wise. If Henry is guilty, I'm to blame for it. And he must be guilty and not dead.
Thanks, Mr. Sprague. Come in again, huh? Oh, I'm sorry. You caught me on a busy night. I read about this thing with Hank Lillis in tonight's paper. First I heard about it. You think he did it?
It's one possibility, Raymond. As a matter of fact, I looked you up to ask you the same question.
You mean, do I think he did it? Well, if it turns out that way, it'll sure be a surprise to me. The paper said they were looking into the idea that somebody could have forced him into a car.
Yeah, every angle is being covered.
Yeah, I've known Hank for a pretty long time, and I trust him with my paycheck any day in the week. As far as I know, the only trouble he ever got into was kind of his temper. Got him into a few brawls.
When did you see him last?
Oh, gosh, I don't remember. You see, we used to get out in the town together once every 2 weeks or so, but we haven't for a couple of months. He won't admit it, but I think that he's pretty thick with this girl he's going with.
Oh? I didn't know about that.
Yeah. They stopped in here one night to gas up. It's her car. She's pretty all right. Blonde, but I don't know. She kind of struck me as a dish that's been around quite a bit, if you know what I mean. Sometimes you can tell the way they kind of look at you, you know?
What's her name, do you know?
Well, the more I think of it, if Hank is in trouble, I'll lay you 10 to 1 it is this blonde. What the devil was her name? I talked to him about her. Lily or Lillian, I think. Oh, what was her name?
His mother doesn't know about her, I take it. She didn't mention any girl.
No, this one is not the type to take home to Mother. He said he met her at the bank somewhere.
I can check that then.
Yeah. Be right with you. Right with you. If her father is some kind of a guard there or something.
Guard? A private detective by any chance? Was her last name Shade?
Shade, that's it. Lillian Shade. How could I forget a name like that?
Go ahead. Pour yourself another drink, Shade. I've got an extra bottle in my luggage.
Yeah. Did you tell the police about this?
Not yet.
This will be the end for me if she's mixed up in it.
You know where she is?
Yeah, she told me she was going to spend a couple of days with a friend.
Why don't you check the friend? Maybe your daughter is there.
She didn't mention any names. She never does. She's no good. She's like her mother was. You mind?
Go ahead. Where is her mother?
She ran off with some guy. Lillian was about 5. I shipped her off to my sister in Minneapolis, but I had to take her back when my sister died. She started running wild when she was 13, and I never could stop her.
If they pull this together, it's liable to set child psychology back 3 years. The son of a mother who really tried to do the right thing, maybe tried too hard. And the daughter of a guy who didn't try at all. Did you make a point of not mentioning her when we were talking about the Lillis kid earlier?
I was waiting for you to ask that. I didn't know there was anything between them. She met him when she dropped in at the bank one morning. I guess I knew they met like that a few more times, but the rest of it I didn't know anything about.
Did she have a job?
She hasn't worked for a few months. When she does work, it's in some cheap bar, so that's worse.
Was it your car she drove?
No, it was hers.
You know the license number?
No, but that won't be hard to learn.
You're sure it was registered in her name then?
Well, I never noticed the slip. I supposed it was. She said some friend bet some races for her, and she got it with the money she won. I can't see any reason why it wouldn't be in her name.
Yeah.
Dollar.
Huh?
It was damn decent of you to talk to me instead of going to the police.
Instead? I hope you aren't going to ask me not to give this to the police.
Oh, no, of course not. But I was going to ask you to let me tell them. It's going to look mighty bad for me if you go in, with Scotty Dyer in charge of the case and his old man and I on the force together in the old days. I don't want it to look like I was holding back information from him.
Were you?
No, but I won't be able to prove it to you until we find Lillian. She'll tell you I didn't know anything about her and Henry.
All right, Shade. You going in tonight?
Just as soon as I leave here. And you don't have to do this, but I'd appreciate it if you could forget your calling me down here. It would be better for me if they didn't know you had to tell me about Lillian.
All I'm interested in is getting the money back. Doesn't make any difference what I say or don't say. You go to the police tonight, and we'll play it as it comes after that. Johnny Dollar.
This is Sergeant Dyer, Dollar.
Oh, yeah, Sergeant. You're on it early this morning. Anything doing?
Henry Lillis just gave himself up.
When? This morning?
Yep. Hitchhiked in from someplace up the lake. Something about a fight with one of the men in the deal. He's messed up some.
What about the money?
They need some medical work before we can get a decent statement from him. Shock, mostly. I put him in the hospital.
Didn't he say anything?
And he kept mumbling something about somebody with a name like Saunders. Go on down. We'll talk to him as soon as we can. I think he'll be ready to tell his part of the story anyway.
I met Sergeant Dyer at 10 that morning. It was after some 15 minutes of conversation had passed by without mention of Pat Shade that I learned he hadn't reported the night before. I brought up the subject myself, and Dyer knew him well enough to automatically reach for the phone and call the bar at my hotel. Shade had stayed there until it closed. 3 more calls to his office, his home, and the bank failed to raise him. But right then, it didn't seem too important to the case, since Henry Lillis was in custody. We got in to see him at 11:30. He was a slight, fair-haired kid, by this time past the feeling of fear. His face was pale and blotched with the disinfectant the doctor had put on some scratches and bruises.
You're strong enough to talk now, Lillis?
I guess so.
This man is from the company that bonded you.
You don't look like you had much fun out of that 80 grand, Lillis.
No, I didn't.
Where is the money?
I don't know where it is now, but we took it to a house above Lake Bluff.
Who is we?
I don't care who it hurts now. Lillian Shade.
She was with you then.
She was with me or I was with her. I don't suppose it makes any difference. We were together.
You mentioned hurting somebody. Did you mean her father?
Yeah. He talked to me about her once. He told me she wasn't any good for me. I hated him then for saying that about his own daughter, but I sure wish I'd listened to him. I wish I'd believed him. None of this would have happened if I'd had.
It did happen, Lillis. We want to know about it. Everything about it.
Well, I don't know exactly how it started. I met her and I was stupid. I'd never known anybody like her before, and it sort of seemed as if we were in the same boat.
What do you mean, the same boat?
Well, neither one of us had all the things we wanted, and it looked like we never would.
If everybody in that boat turned criminal, there wouldn't be enough banks to go around.
Well, I never thought about it before, the way she did, but the longer I went with her, the more I began to. She'd done other things, never anything like this.
What kind of things?
Well, the way she got the money for her car. She met this man and learned some things from him. She did it so that it could never be called blackmail, and she got the money.
The Badger game, maybe.
I don't think I know quite what that is.
Go on.
Well, I don't think I have to go through all of it, but, well, one night she kept talking about how I carried large amounts of money all the time and that we didn't have...
I don't think I have to go through all of it. Well, one night she kept talking about how I carried large amounts of money all the time and that we didn't have any of our own. She said she wouldn't marry me unless we could be rich. So we planned this thing. She waited down the street in her car 4 days in a row until I knew I